Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors, and if you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is titled, Karen stole property boundary markers from my land and claimed she is the original owner of my garden. This story takes place many years ago and I never knew about places like this where I could tell the story. On the bright side of things, the term Karen did not exist back then, so now I have something to call her. While reading these other stories, I noticed that there are two different types of people. Ones that think their neighbors are fine until something goes wrong, and then those that have issues with their neighbor right off the bat. This situation is the latter to an extreme. We were not even fully moved in before we had problems, which showed how much of a Karen she was. To back up a little bit, we bought a house that needed some work done on it before we could move in. Nothing major, but we still had time at our old place, so we might as well use it to fix the new home. We got new kitchen tiles and a fresh coat of paint. Nothing crazy like tearing down walls or having a huge construction crew annoying everybody. One thing that we wanted in our new home was a fence, since one did not exist yet. We did not want to look like bad or snobby neighbors, we just wanted a fenced-in yard for the dogs. We had 2 labs at the time and we wanted to give them a nice yard to be able to run around in. We did not know where the exact property line was though, so we had it checked out and they even put those little flag boundary markers telling us where it should be built. Everything was fine until Karen enters. She could have waited for us to leave, but I guess she was not that smart and instead tried to pull this stunt right under our noses. We were overseeing some work in the kitchen when I went outside to have a smoke. I caught Karen moving all of the property flags deeper into our property. It turns out she was trying to move them so when the fence was built, she would get more land that did not actually belong to her. I wanted to start off my new life there as a friendly neighbor, but I was not going to stand for anybody's BS. Me? What do you think you're doing? Karen, that is none of your business what I do at my home. Me? You cannot just move property markers to where you want them to go. Karen, I'm going to tell your supervisor that you are out here smoking instead of inside working. I guess she thought I was one of the people installing the tiles in the kitchen. Me? I'm the new owner actually. If I catch you messing with the property markers again, then I'm going to call the police. Karen, you don't know anything. I've been here for years and I know that this is my property. I'm the original owner and this garden bed is mine. I finally noticed that there is a garden bed that she's trying to maneuver the property line to get it on her side. It was not even like a planted garden, it was just a space that a garden clearly was at one point. I warned her again that I got the line officially marked and that was where it was. That was just not good enough for her and she started up on a bunch of different rants that seemed to make less and less sense. She was trying to say that fencing in this area was illegal and then that property lines were based on land claimed and not what is in the town's information. I could not get a word in and she just kept going off while trying to move another flag. I did not let her through and told her to get the hell off my property or I was going to call the police for trespassing. She started a rant about how her kids could not play outside anymore because of me building a fence. From what I gathered, she was letting them play in the backyard when nobody had owned it for a while. I did notice one thing while she was going on, and that was the grass near where the flags were. They did not just place flags for boundary markers, but they also sprayed some of the grass red. It was not enough to see unless you were looking for it, and it could work as the boundary line. Still, I did not want her on my property right now and told her that she had one more chance to go inside before I called the police. At that point, I wished she just stayed so I could show her that I was not someone who gave out empty threats. I just did not want to deal with the hassle of this on top of moving and repairs. Instead, she walked back onto her property and told me that smoking was also illegal in this neighborhood. Okay, Karen, whatever your crazy ass says. I blew a puff towards her and that was the last thing before she went back into her house. I had a feeling that this was not going to be the last I heard about this, and I was right. She waited till we left to move the rest of the flags again to make it seem like the border was in a totally different spot. I explained this to the people building the fence and told them to look for the red grass to see the line instead of the flags because they got moved. I was lucky enough to be there when she realized the fence was built on the property line and not where she tried to move it. She went ballistic and started telling me that I was stealing her land and she owned all of it. She threatened to come over the fence and take back what was rightfully hers. I reminded her that if she trespassed on my land, I was going to call the police on her. It helped that once we moved in, she seemed to think that my dogs were vicious. Anybody who has ever known a typical lab knows that this is the opposite. Every once in a while I was still hearing her complaints about the fence and how it was on her side of the property. Every time though, I would give her the same answer and tell her if the town's official surveyor says that the fence is putting her property on my side, then I will pay to move the fence. However, she will never win that and she knows it, so that never ended up happening. Weirdly enough, I never saw these so-called kids that she said that had always been playing on my property. Maybe she made them up or hides them away in a minivan while she is getting a haircut and speaking to a manager. Last note is that we ended up turning that garden plot into something rather nice. Just to end the story with knowing we got our fence and now have a backyard with pretty flowers and 2 dogs running around. And yeah, ripe stars, sometimes it is really difficult to comprehend the audacity some people possess and how entitled a few select people can be. If you ever had entitled neighbors, please feel free to share your own story either in the comments or on r/ripe stories on Reddit. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to my channel and like the video if you enjoy my content. Thank you so much in advance. The next one is titled Revenge on the Neighbors. My wife and I are renting the top floor of a house and the downstairs neighbors are terrible people. They leave their shoes, garbage and plants in front of our stairwell and steps. We have asked them several times not to do this because it is very narrow and a trip hazard. They always say sorry and clean it up, and then a few days later it is all back. We share a yard and have to care for it. They have taken all of the gardening areas for themselves and don't feel the need to share space with us because they were there first. I ended up mowing the yard 80% of the time because they are always too wasted or just don't care. However, we use the backstairs a lot due to the fact of the problems with the front entryway with their crap in front of our stairs. When I first cut the grass, I accidentally ran over some plant that I had no way of knowing was there since the weeds and grass had overgrown the area. This was after I had already asked if there was anything I should be careful of, and their answer was no. She threw a fit and complained at me. Also, I have to go around the yard and clean up all the poop they just leave laying around, like gardening tools just dropped where they were working or empty containers, just so I can mow. It is very aggravating. They used to be a couple but had a huge fight over Christmas, and now she has a new guy and is constantly fighting with the ex still living there. It can become quite noisy with the screaming and yelling both inside and outside of the house. Now that she has this new guy, of course, she now wants to show off by having great garden and finally cleaned it out, put in new dirt and weed lining. Last year they planted stuff and did not really tend to it, and it became overgrown and did not produce much. So, for the petty revenge, I bought several packets of cheap wildflower seeds and I walked down to the yard with some seeds in my hand every few days and threw them into the freshly set up garden beds and sprinkled them. I go to a different bed each time, they have 4 and won't share space. They are getting ready to plant and I will just keep throwing the seeds in a little at a time, and also along the back fence area where they finally cleaned up all the junk they had thrown there. They had an inspection, so I think this is why they cleaned up their stuff, so I can have deniability. I hope they enjoy their garden this year because I'm gonna enjoy the flowers. And you know, Ripe Stars, I gotta say that is probably one of the best petty revenges ever. If you really don't like your neighbor and your neighbor does not like a specific kind of flowers, just plant some sneaky flowers in their garden. Innocent and petty, that's how it should be. The next one is titled Crazy Karen Called the Police on Us. I live in a 3-story house with my wife and 9-month-old baby that has been split into different apartments. There are 3 parking spaces. And guys, here you can see a picture of the parking spaces, and by the way, that is a very nice parking spot near the ocean. Render me jealous. Anyway, near my entrance and the Karen's, we have 2 cars in the picture AD, the empty spot is where Karen parks. There is also other parking for guests and whatnot. My father-in-law will come over once a month for dinner, since it is hard to eat out with the baby. A few months ago, he came over for dinner and parked in her spot. We have told him every time to not park in her spot, but he is an old stubborn man and I genuinely think he forgets. After dinner, we walk out and Karen has blocked him in. However, there is room for him to wiggle out. Karen has never said a word to me ever and that night left a passive-aggressive note on my windshield. So ever since then, when my father-in-law visits, I will park in the other spot so he can take one of ours. Fast forward to tonight, we are moving out tomorrow, so we decided to have one last dinner in the house. I came home late from work and forgot to park my car in the other spot, so my father-in-law parked in the spot Karen usually parks in. We have a good dinner and I walk him to his car and Karen was parked behind my father-in-law. So I walk to Karen's door and start knocking for like 5 minutes, so I knock on the window right next to the door for another minute or so. All of a sudden, I hear screaming from inside. "Who is knocking so loud? Are you trying to break my window?" She starts cussing me out and I'm trying to say that we are sorry because we really try not to take her spot and I felt genuinely bad for blocking taking her spot. But she is screaming over me and I say, "I'm sorry, I cannot control other people." And she replies, "Yes, you can." After that answer, I realized that talking to her is pointless, so she starts yelling at my father-in-law and he is threatening to tow her car if she doesn't move. She tells him that he cannot tow it, so he says, "Then what am I supposed to do? Break in and move it myself?" I tell my father-in-law to calm down and we called our landlord. Then Karen calls the police and is saying that I was trying to break her window and there is a man trespassing and threatening her. Long story short, the police come and she's trying to press charges against my father-in-law and the police keep telling her that she has nothing to press charges for and in fact the only one that did anything illegal was her. Then she starts going on about how because she is African American and that we want her to be killed by the police even though she is the one that called them over a parking dispute. After 2 hours, the police convince her to let it go, especially since me and my father-in-law could press charges on her, not the other way around. All the police officers kept apologizing to us and even the landlord was like, "I had no clue this lady was this crazy." Not sure if it means anything, but where I live there are very little Caucasians. I can go months without seeing another white guy. So the cops really did not play into her race card. Edit: I should clarify that there is no assigned parking. The landlord has told them this multiple times. It was a courtesy to keep that spot open for her. Her guests park in our spot frequently and we just park in another spot. Even though I still felt horrible because her spot was taken and was expecting her to be upset with us. However, I was not expecting a full-blown meltdown calling the police trying to get us arrested. I don't know if she had a bad day or something and this was just the last straw or what, but calling the police and lying by saying there was a trespasser who was trying to break into her car because of what boils down to a mild inconvenience is insane. When the police arrived, they quickly realized the situation and told my father-in-law that if he wanted to press charges, they would take her away. And by the way, here it is illegal to purposefully block someone's car in. I even told my father-in-law not to press charges and told the landlord that he should not rush to not renew her lease. All of this could have been the product of a bad day that boiled over. The escalation is the Karen part. Should I have checked that he was parked in the right spot? Yes. Did Karen have the right to be mad? Yes. Was my father-in-law also acting like a Karen? Yes. This experience was no fun. I just wanted to share because I have never seen a grown person act this way. The next one is titled Ruined House View. So my neighbor is a family with 2 teen kids and they always were the crappiest neighbors imaginable. I had a dog that would bark like any dog. It was a beagle, so not even something that loud, and they would call me or my mother anytime the dog barked for more than a minute to do something because she was disturbing their peace and their kids. Anytime our TV volume reached over 20 or I played with friends in my yard, she would call my mother and complain to her. All of this usually happened at like 4 or 5 p.m, not early in the morning or in the evening. Meanwhile, their newborn cried all night because neither of them could be bothered to go check on it right next to my room. We lived in a bifamiliar house, like think big house divided in half by a wall, but as soon as you said something, the mother just went, "Oh, kids, haha." And they would argue and scream at all hours of the day, because families, am I right? Anyway, throughout the years they never parked in front of their house, and it was a pretty large road with plenty of space, and every holiday my relatives could not park near our house because my neighbors kept parking in front of my house, leaving their front of the house free. If you parked in front of their house, they would call me to ask for my relatives to move their car, or they would call a tow truck. Other people parked in front of their house, so there was no space to park apart from a small park 10 minutes away. They also had 3 cars, so they always parked in other people's places. So recently my grandma passed and our relatives came to my house to have a sort of private funeral, and of course there was no space anywhere, so I said to my relatives to park in front of our neighbor's house since they were just gonna be there for a couple of hours. Of course, not even 5 minutes later they called me asking to move the car, and I finally was too fed up with this damn Karen of a woman and asked her why. They kept parking in front of other people's houses and left theirs free, so we were forced to park in front of theirs. Her answer: she likes to leave the front of her house free of cars, so when she looks out she can see her lawn with no disturbances like ugly cars, and if someone comes to take pictures of their beautiful house, it won't be disturbed. So please remove the cars or I will have them towed. Against my mother's wishes, I finally told her to F off, and that if she dares to call a tow truck, I will call one for her cars as well. She did not call but kept parking in front of my house, but at least she stopped calling to move our cars from her house. And the next one is titled Try to Stop Me Building One House. I will build 2 instead and block the neighbor's view. So I bought a house in the UK that had a large piece of land in the back garden. Almost all other houses in the street had houses built in their gardens, easily 90%, so I thought this would be a no-brainer on getting planning permission from the local city government to build one house. What I didn't anticipate was the neighborhood busybody curtain twitcher living next door to me. Let's call her Kay. Kay tried everything in her power to stop me. She organized a neighborhood residents association hate campaign to complain to local politicians to prevent the planning permission being granted to build the house. She lied her ass off and talked about how if the house was built, traffic would increase and small children would be run over. Insane lies. I spent 3 years fighting Karen and the local residents association and the politicians. A long, painful and expensive battle, but I won. Eventually I got my planning to build one house. But what Karen failed to realize was I was working with 2 other neighbors with land to the rear of their houses to ensure all 3 of us would get planning permission to build houses on our respective rear gardens. Neighbor J was to the left-hand side of busybody neighbor K, I was on the right-hand side of busybody K, and neighbor M was to the right of my property, as below: J house, K house, I house and M house. After planning permission to build houses on our respective rear gardens was granted, I bought the land to the rear of J house. I then built 2 houses, one behind J house and one behind I house. Now, every morning when Kay opens her bedroom rear window curtains and looks into her backyard, there is a middle finger poking up, house, to the left of her backyard, and a middle finger house to the right of her backyard. F you, Karen, enjoy the view. And I gotta say guys, for this story I would have loved to have some kind of drawing from the OP to better understand the situation, but I think overall the story was still understandable.
Wait, don't eat my finger, Disney. Who is cleaning herself? That's Disney. Don't eat my finger, no. And her neck already looks much better. Almost no dark spots anymore, so now she is not scratching herself anymore, so that's already much better. Here, as you can see, she allows me to rub her belly too. No problem, right, Disney? Boop, boop. Such a cute kid. There, as you can see, guys, this is also where the vet shaved her to make sure she does not have the acne or whatever it's called. But now the vet said it was just because she was scratching herself there. And now everything is fine again. But yeah, unfortunately, she looks, as you can see, like he shaved there, so it doesn't look that nice. But I think the hair will grow back quickly, so no problem, right, Disney? Then you will be even more beautiful again. Disney, Disney, Disney. Alright guys, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.
And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.